Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Jeanette McNeely. Today, we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the first Battle of El Alamein, named after an otherwise unremarkable railway stop in Egypt's western desert. The battles that took place between July and November 1942 were the turning point of the war in North Africa. By July 1942, the struggle had swung sharply in favour of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Panzer Army Africa. The Allies had been forced back deep into Egypt. In Alexandria, about 100 miles from the front lines, civilians began to flee. Smoke was seen coming from the British Embassy as diplomatic staff began burning papers. The capture of Cairo and the Suez Canal seemed almost inevitable. The fate of the campaign rested with the 8th Army, which included British, New Zealand, South Africa, Indian and Australian troops, and its new defensive position near the tiny railway stop of El Alamein. Before dawn on the 10th of July 1942, the 9th Division, which had earned a fierce reputation as the Rats of Tobruk, launched its attack. Catching Rommel off guard, it took the important high ground at Tel Elisa. Australian troops spent the first few days fighting off heavy counterattacks before fighting spread to other parts of the front line. The 9th Division suffered almost 6,000 casualties between July and November 1942. Notably, the 2nd 28th Battalion had been virtually wiped out at Ruin Ridge in July. As well as halting Rommel's advance, the battle that took place at El Alamein in July laid the groundwork for the decisive victory that would come in November. Although the price was fearfully high, those involved played a crucial role in ensuring this victory, and in doing so, indelibly altered the course of the war itself. Today, we remember El Alamein. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Queensland, Injune State School and Stafford State School. And from Western Australia, Santa Maria College, Attadale. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem? Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Alfred Lear. Alfred Lear was born in Sydney on the 3rd of April 1910 to Percy and Florence Lear. Little is known of his childhood or schooling, but by his teens Alfred was working in far west New South Wales on outback stations. There he worked as a labourer for some 15 years at Yakawinda Station near Broken Hill. Over the years, he honed his horsemanship skills and became well known throughout the far west as an outstanding horseman and breaker. By all accounts, his prowess on horseback won Alfred a swag of prizes and medals at competitions throughout the region. A noted cricketer, Alfred was nicknamed Rowdy, though we don't know whether he earned that living up to the title or, in the quirky Australian way, just being the opposite. Regardless, Alfred was settled enough in his work and life to marry, and in 1937 he wed Joyce Patience Morford. Joyce was also from the far west New South Wales, her family being long settled in the Milparinga district. The couple soon started a family and had a son, who they named Alfred. The family was living in Broken Hill, and Alfred was working at the nearby Glen Line Station when war was declared in 1939. He enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Broken Hill on the 16th of July 1940 and was soon on the train to Adelaide. Alfred and other recruits went straight into the 3rd Infantry Training Depot where they were taught the basics of soldiering. The 2nd 48th Infantry Battalion would be their new home and family, a unit mostly made up of men from South Australia and Western Australia. In November 1940, it was time for the Australians to head overseas. After a week's leave, Alfred and the rest of the battalion embarked on the transport ship Stratheden in Adelaide on the 7th of November. After brief stopovers at Fremantle and Colombo, they sailed up the Suez Canal and disembarked in Egypt. From there, they were sent to Palestine. In early 1941, the 2nd 48th Battalion, along with other units of the 9th Division, moved to Cyrenaica, today's Libya, to complete their training. They had little time to prepare before serious action came their way. After driving Italian forces across North Africa, the game suddenly changed for the Allies. In March, Rommel's German Africa Corps arrived on the scene and promptly threw them back. The Australians of the 9th Division stopping at Tobruk. The siege of that town has since gone down in legend as the Rats of Tobruk. Held out for more than 7 months until relieved at the end of 1941. While the records tell us almost nothing of Alfred's individual experience during the siege, we can assume he endured the hardships and tough fighting along with his comrades. Whilst there, he was promoted to Lance Corporal. After Tobruk was relieved, the 9th Division returned to Palestine and Syria to rest and recuperate. Alfred was lucky enough to be selected to record a Christmas message for home. Broadcast nationally by ABC Radio, we can only hope that Joyce and young Alfred were able to catch his words, for they would be the last they heard of their husband and father. After breaking through Allied lines in June 1942, Rommel's forces quickly captured Tobruk and were pushing into Egypt at an alarming pace. They had to be stopped before reaching Alexandria, Cairo, and the Suez Canal. A defensive line was hastily formed at a tiny railway stop in the desert called El Alamein, as the 9th Division was rushed to the front. At 3:40 a.m. on the 10th of July, the Australians made their first attack, a night operation, to capture the vital high ground at Tel Elissa, known as the Hill of Jesus. Moving forward in complete silence without artillery support, the Australians quickly overran the Italian and German troops before them. The 2nd 48th consolidated their positions on the ridge and the railway line. While the operation was a complete success, throughout the night and the next day, the Australians were subjected to heavy artillery, dive bombing, and strong counterattacks by German tank and infantry forces. We do not know whether Alfred fell during the initial attack or sometime later, if he was hit by a shell, died beneath the tanks of a truck, or was killed charging forward with his Bren gun to rescue comrades who had been cut off. All we know is he died there that day in the thick of the battle. He was 32 years old. Alfred was initially buried on the battlefield, but his remains were later moved to the nearby Commonwealth War Cemetery at El Alamein. On the anniversary of his death, in the In Memoriam of Broken Hills paper, it read, "In loving memory of our darling daddy, Lance Corporal Alfred Frederick Rowdy Lear. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among with nearly 40,000 other Australians who died serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. You will see Lance Corporal Alfred Frederick Lear on the right. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Alfred Lear, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.